So what we're going to do tonight is a little different from what we've done the other nights. I'm going to make a presentation of the axis of change, and if you'll grant me permission just to draw it all out and present it, and then we'll do the questions at that point, because there'll be a lot of questions, I'm sure, in your mind up till that. If you have coaching conversations, it is chapter 10 in Coaching Conversations. So the basic details are there. I've written 7 or 8 chapters on this. So what I'm going to present tonight is really just a small piece of it. And what we're now doing in meta coaching is to present one of these axes every other day. So day 1 we present axis 1, day 3 we present another axis, day 5 another axis. And so in meta coaching we give people 2 days to work with each axis. To begin with, this is a model for change, and it's a model for how not people who are hurt and traumatic and wounded in some way changes, but it's how people who are growing, developing, and who love to change, who embrace change. So when we think about change, what are the factors that change us? When we change our mind, change our habit, change our emotions, change the way we talk to ourselves. When we have an alteration, when we're not the same as we were before, how does that change come about? Well, there's many, many factors of change, and we'll be listing some of these factors of change. And what we're going to put together is a model for how to think about the whole process from beginning to end. And when we do that, one of the first things we have to ask are what are some of these key factors? And we've separated them into 4 key factors. So when change occurs, obviously there's motivation. Today, as we talked, one of the places where we stopped as we were working with one person was, do you have the motivation to change? Do you really want to change? Because if a person doesn't really want to change, then change is going to become really, really hard because they'll fight because they don't want it. So do you want to change? What do you want to change? If you could change, what would you change? So first is motivation. Some people are motivated to change, and they may have an idea of what they want to change. So motivation has 2 sides, and each one of these will have 2 sides. What are we going to change to, and what are we going to change from? And that's going to create our first axis in a little bit, but motivation is one of the issues. The second issue is decision. Okay, so you feel the need to change. Have you decided to change? Have you decided? Are you going to? Well, and when it comes to decision is a weighing pros and cons. So anytime you've made a major decision in your life, you're weighing, here's what I'll get and here's what I'll lose. And so you go back and forth. And if it's pretty well weighed, then you're pretty indecisive. Back and forth, pros and cons, advantages, disadvantages, weighing back and forth. And nothing tips the balance, as it were. Or maybe it tips it for a while, but then this tips it. And so decision. Are you going to decide and say yes for once and all? Or is it back and forth deciding? And as we decide, we're probing. Advantages, disadvantages, going toward and going away. So we're probing until we make the decision and say, let's do it. Or we're not going to do it. Once we've decided, then another big issue of change is the creation. What are you going to change? So another big issue is creation. And we say that creation occurs twice. Creation occurs first in the mind, and then the creation occurs in reality. So do you have a game plan? Do you have a strategy? Do you know how to change? What are you going to do? And then once you have a game plan, and it may not be well worked out, it may be just kind of in outline, but at least you have, what's the first thing you're going to do? And are you actually going to do it? So you actually change. You actually make that difference. And of course, whenever we make that difference, it's just experimental. It's tentative. It's small. It's the beginning place of the change. And at that place, the question is, will it last? Will it endure? Will it continue? And so that brings up the next issue of continuance or solidification. Will you keep the change? Will you solidify it? And in this instance, that first little bit of change, we reinforce it, we strengthen it, we confirm it, we validate it so that it'll grow. Because most changes are experimental and they're small. And so as we play with it, as we reinforce it, once it has some robustness and I made a change, now I can start testing it to see what it's made of. Will it last? And I can start testing it. So this gives us the 4 axes. The 4 axes of the model: motivation, decision, creation, and solidification. So the first axis is the motivation axis, and because it is away from something, and because it is toward something, that happens to be a metaprogram, away from toward, the motivation program. So this also is another key facet of NLP in the sense of away from and toward. And so one of the first things we do is, what do you want, or what do you not want? So the not want and the want. How much do you want that? Do you really, really, really want that, or just kind of want that? Or do you really, really, really want to get away from this? So the push and the pull, the aversion and the attraction. And so with any kind of change, there has to be energy, the engine of change. So this is the engine. This is the motor that's going to drive it. And is there enough energy away from or toward? Now, if a person is a toward person and you put that carrot out and dangle it and they're ready to jump, that's a good motivation. It's the toward, it's the attraction. But with a person who is toward, if the toward kind of gets a little weak, then their motivation dies. So then they have to get pumped up again. The person who is away from, they don't want this and they don't want this and they've had enough of this, and they may not be looking at what they're getting, but they know what they're getting away from. And the reverse is for the person going toward, they may not notice what price they're paying. So the best thing is balance, away from and toward. And so when we work with somebody, what are you moving away from? What are you moving toward? And noticing which is stronger, which is weaker, and if there's enough, so that if this gets weaker, this kicks in, and this is the red hot poker up the rear end that gets them moving. They're kicking the dude. And so this is the motivation one. So that's one axis. And anybody who changes, most people, the great majority of people, don't change until they have to. And that's why they say change is hard. And I hate change. And change is disruptive and upsetting and frustrating. And so, because it's driven by the negative emotions. So that's that axis. Once we have the energy, then the decision comes in. So this is the decision one. That's the motivation axis. And in deciding, because we are now weighing, one of the issues is how much do I reflect upon things? And so reflecting and probing, and so reflective versus active. Well, if you know metaprograms, there's another metaprogram, reflective, active. Reflective, active, reactive versus inactive metaprogram. So when something comes to you, how quickly do you act, or how long do you just reflect and reflect and reflect? So here's another way we process information. Some people, they weigh and they do analysis, paralysis by analysis. They just keep weighing it, and they need more information, But there comes a place where, we've weighed enough, and now it's time to be active. And so here are 2 other polls on this one. And how much reflection do you have to have? How much do you have to weigh it? When will you be convinced? When will you feel that I need to make the decision? And some people are very active. They don't weigh it at all. They just act, and then they think about it. And the reactives are even worse than that, and the inactives at the other end of the scale would be even further. But in the axis of change, how much do we need to talk this through? Because sometimes just talking it through with a person, and they get somebody on the outside just to mirror back, and do some reality testing, and they decide, I'm going to change. They have a kind of an idea of where to go, and they have a kind of an idea what they're getting away from. But this is not real clear. This is mostly emotional energy. Now we've got a cognitive or conative energy, a decision. And so after emotion and choice, now we need thought. And so the next axis is really an axis of thought. And we use the meta-programs of internal reference and external reference. When we internally do referencing, we go inside, what do I think? What do I feel? What do I want? How do I picture it? How do I represent it? And we internally reference and create a game plan. Once I internally reference it, then, well, what is this going to be like when I take it outside and do something about it? Where will I do it at? With whom? When? Where? How? So, internal reference, external reference. Now, internal reference, people can spend the rest of their lives, creating that new game plan. And perfectionists can just keep doing it again and again, and it's not quite ready. So that can be a danger. The external reference people, once they made the decision, they can just start doing stuff, but they may not have a real good game plan. They tend to be the ones who invent it as they go and hope they're on the right path. But they're externally referencing. So here's another one, and this is really the creation, as they internally created and externally created. So this is the inner game, to use Tim Galway's language, the inner game that we create the game plan, and this is the outer game. We're actually doing something now. We're actually making it happen. It's the outer game. We're acting. The next axis is the axis of solidification, because once we've brought it out, once the action is there, the change is there, we've planned the change, now we've made the change, we had the motivation to change, we had the decision to change, and now we are creating the change. When the change comes out, it's going to be very fragile, very small, very experimental. It's just going to be that at the beginning. And so what we need is some reinforcement. So we're going to play off now of the meta program of sameness and difference. With sameness, we're going to look for what's working. What's working? What's going well? Good on you. And so by sorting for sameness, we're going to reinforce what's working. We're going to validate, confirm, celebrate, honor what's working. As we do so, and it gets stronger and stronger, more robust, now we can look for what's not working. If we start looking for what's not working when it first appears, we can just kill it. But now that it's robust and it's got some strength to it, now we can look for what's not working. Where is it not working? How is it not working? And so as we look for differences, we're now testing. And as we test it, put it to the test, monitor it, watch it, observe it, the new information we get here sends us right back to refinements of creation. And now we've got some new ideas about how to make it work better, which we then start manifesting, which we reinforce, which we test, which we put back. So that's the axis of change. With the axis of change, this gives us actually 9 roles for the change facilitator, the change agent, the coach.
Let's expand the coach model, right?
Yeah, no, and let's put that off for now.
Okay, that's fine.
So this gives us 9 roles for the coach. And we draw it this way. At the very center, the coach is the facilitator. Because the coach is essentially facilitating and being an agent of change. And he or she is going to be an agent of motivation. As a coach, sometimes you're going to awaken the vision. What do you want? What vision, what dream, what hope, what else do you want out of life? And so the coach will be the awakener of all the things that the person is going toward. And so we dance with a person as we awaken. Sometimes, before the person can be awakened or after the person is awakened, the coach over here getting them to move away will be the challenger. As challenger, we are saying, look at reality in the face. That's why it takes a lot of ego strength to be coached. Therapy is to build ego strength. Coaching is to play off of and work with ego strength. So we're going to challenge them. What's going on now? Is that what you want? Is that the way it's working? And we turn up the away froms. And as they turn away out the away froms as challenger, we also awaken the vision. As you move from here, you can go there. And this is all the motivation axes. And the motivation axes you may need to revisit it at any time in the whole process. But this is the motivation axes. The decision axes, the coach is going to play the role of prober. Let's explore. Let's reflect. Let's think it through. What are your frames? What are you thinking? What are your beliefs? What are your decisions? What are your understandings? Where do you come from? What's keeping you where you have been and preventing the change? And so we probe and probe and probe and probe until they reflect on and have great awareness as to why to change and the decision to change and go away from. Sometimes the coach, as this goes on, needs to be the provoker. It's time to take action. You're going to do this. You're going to do this today. When are you going to do this? You'll never do this. You need 5 more years of this pain. So the coach will be teaser, provoker, and will be provoking a person to make the decision of change. I am going to change. No, you're not. You don't have it in it. You're not man enough. Show it to me. You won't do it. You won't follow through. And so we provoke, probing and provoking to get the decision. So the first 2 acts is motivation and decision is all preparation for change. It's not change yet. No change has occurred. It's creating that energy and that decision. Once the person has made the decision and we're now creating, then we become co-creator. Co-create. We co-create. We don't do the creating. That would be therapy, consulting, something else. We don't do the creating. We co-create. We facilitate them to create. What do you want? And getting them to design the new game plan. And we're giving birth. As a coach, one of the other metaphors we like using is we're the midwife. We are giving birth to and helping them to conceive and then to give birth to a great idea that has some structure to it, some formulation, and you never know what's going to be created because it's their creation. And creation by its very nature is messy and chaotic and unknown what they're going to give birth to. So we co-create with them, and as they develop that game plan, that inner game, then we become the actualizer. We play the role of actualizer as we say, what one thing are you going to do today? When are you going to do it? With whom are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? And so we get them to bring it forth in action, and we play the role of actualizer to that as they do that. As they bring it forth, then we play the role of reinforcer. And reinforcer is a fun role to play as a coach, because in reinforcing, we are going to be noticing and punctuating and calling it forth and honoring it and celebrating it and giving high fives. As we reinforce, you did that good. You started it, you did it, you spoke up first. So we look for the smallest approximation in the right direction. And then we have a party as we reinforce it. Good on you. And so we reinforce it and validate. So we use a lot of behaviorism techniques, of reinforcement techniques to give value to it. And then as it grows up and becomes stronger and stronger, we play the role of tester. And now we monitor and we test it, and we start asking questions like, where does it not work, and what was not to your liking, how can we make it better, and what resource do you need? And so we do testing. And from testing will come new information that we're going to feed back to creation, and then it's going to go through the cycle again. And so it becomes an open loop, an open feedback loop, so that it's continuous learning, continuous improvement. So in this model, there's no relapse. Anything that somebody could call a relapse is just new information about what to do next, to manifest it in a new little way, to reinforce that. And so there's no relapse. There's also no resistance. Because before we get to the second half of the axis of change, the last two axes, motivation and decision, it's not our motivation, it's not our decision. So they can't resist us. What do you want? What do you don't want? Are you going to do it or not? So the two things that make a model of change a therapy model is resistance and relapse. And so for someone who wants to change, you got enough energy, you got motivation, you ready to do the work, you willing to do anything it takes, are you going to do it? What are you going to do? What are you going to? Have you made the decision to change? And then what are you going to change? How are you going to start manifesting that change? How is it going to grow and move in the smallest approximations to the right way? And is it working? Is it lasting? And so the 8 roles that the coach, the 9 roles with the facilitator, the 9 roles that the coach plays to the person in change, and so we play the change agent in the process. If at any point the person is not actualizing, we would move back to motivation or decision. So the dance is a dance that can go anywhere, depending upon the energy and the mind, emotion, body, energy of the client, where they are in the dance. So we dance with them. So this calls on, and you might want to have 9 different genius states. Challenger, awakener, prober, provoker, co-creator, actualizer, reforcer, and tester. Most of us have our favorite roles to play. When Michelle and I do meta coaching, she obviously, if you've heard the tapes or know, she's the prober. She'll probe until you scream, enough. And I tend to play the provoker role and tell them, well, they're not man enough to do that, and tease them. So most of us have our favorite roles. You might be the awakener or the challenger. And so the axis of change, playing with these different dynamics. Education changes us. Sometimes knowledge changes us. So sometimes probing into it, we make that mental click, I know what to do. I'm going to do it. So education can change us. Because the more you learn, you'll be changed as you learn. And sometimes it is the emotion that actually makes the change. Sometimes just the emotion, sometimes the change is done. So sometimes you don't need all different places or roles. But as the person is dancing around and we're just facilitating it, finding out what's going on and what they need and where they're going, we just play the different role. Sometimes you meet a person and they're already changing and they got little bits of it, but they don't think it counts and it's not really up to par and it's not perfect. And so they've done that, and what they need is just somebody to be a celebrant to them. They just need someone to honor it and recognize it, punctuate it, set it apart, and throw a party for them. And when they feel good, and they start saying, well, that does count. It is moving in the right direction. And sometimes we'll meet people, they'll come in, and they've already made the change, and it's there, but it's just in its first form. It's never been tested. It's never been there, and they may have all kinds of fears. I don't know if this will last. Well, let's test it. It's pretty robust. You can do it. You keep doing it. Let's test it. Let's put it through the test. And as we test it, finding a few more refinements and just put it into that loop. So that's the axis of change.
Michael, I was wondering if you could explain, because we went on through a lot of different things the last 3 days, how these sort of connect.
All 3 days.
Well, because we've done, the different exercises and whatever, just kind of to have, okay, this is how this is connected to that. This is how this thought or this system connects to this.
Let me hold that off. We might do that tomorrow night or the next night.
Okay.
Let's deal with axis of change, and if there's nothing else, then we'll come back to that.
Cool.
So, and then I'll do my Charlie Brown. Ah!
Better you than us.
The different labels for the different continuums of the meta programs. How do you? I mean, are you thinking of it, hearing from the meta programs, or at some point you make the crossover of the different labels for your role? You know what I mean? That's kind of it.
Well, the meta programs, you'll hear them, especially in the first one.
Right.
I want this. I'm sick and tired of that. So you'll hear toward and away from. You won't hear reflective active too much. The active you might hear more. I got to do something. I'm going to make a decision. I'm making the decision. Well, are you sure? Have you weighed things? Have you compared things? Or is this a clear decision yet? Or you may hear somebody just going on and on and on. Well, it's that and that. And so when you hear someone indecision or reflecting, then you know that that's where they are. The other ones will be less prominent. But where they are do they have a game plan? So the question as a coach that you can ask yourself, are they motivated? What are they motivated toward? What are they motivated from? So you'll know, okay, I've got this axis, both sides of it. Have they made a decision? Are they ready? Have they made the decision? Are they ready to make the decision? And have they reflected? Are they clear about what decision they're going to make? Do they have a game plan? Have they started acting on it? Are they doing anything? If they are doing something, do they know how to be kinder, gentler to the small approximations as it begins, so that they can let it count and reinforce the beginnings of it? And have they put it to the test? Are they willing to test it? Are they being held accountable? Is somebody monitoring it? Are they learning from it? Are they feeding back their learnings into the process? So those would be some questions that a coach could ask him or herself to see, where am I with this person at any given time?
It's actually pretty amazing because there's so many variables, like in the meta program type of thing. So it's just kind of giving you kind of a pot to hold it in.
Yeah.
You know.
And I love how you've augmented this, because when I first saw this, there were only three axes. And so what solidified in my mind is that this motivation and the decision are the first two sectors, and then we move into the action. I like how you did that, here's it looping, but I also see that you're going to touch other points from time to time. You will come back and you will probe. Like maybe you still need to provoke, because they're only actualizing 80% of what they said they're going to actualize. So you're going to come back and put on your probe hat.
Yeah.
I love it.
Do you find it sometimes hard to get people out of that reflection mode, that they could go on and on and talk about their problems?
Exactly. So any meta program can be overdone. Now, the other thing we've done with this, and we don't have any diagrams, we've got this in diagram form now that we've sent out to the e-groups and things. But if we take the same thing, and if every meta program can be overdone, and I'll see if I can remember all of these. So if we have away from and toward, if we have reflective and active, if we have internal reference and external referent, and if we have sorting for sameness and matching and sorting for difference, then any meta program can be overdone, and when we overdo it, then it becomes dysfunctional. So someone who is toward so much that they have no awareness of what they're moving away from, and they just jump, then they tend to be so reactive and so motivated toward everything, but not looking at what they're moving away from. They may make some really bad decisions and be so motivated and get into they're awakened to visions, but they may be grander and they may be illusory. And then they can have delusions because they keep jumping, and then eventually they'll just jump to the other side. I'm not moving. So here's the away from, and a person can live in that away from so much that they just live in that pain, that misery, and they might just start valuing it. This is the way life is.
That's the way it is.
It sucks, and so they go so far over here, and so it's almost like you can't motivate them because now they're comfortable in their their misery. With regard to reflective and active, this would move to reactive. So when they feel the need to change, they just react and just jump into, and so once again, that's very. So they're not going to. So on this far circle, in contrast to the inner circle, where change occurs, healthy change occurs, here is really dysfunctional change because of something really out of proportion. So they're reactive, and here's the reflective, and then they're inactive. So they reflect so much that they're paralyzed. Whereas these active ones move to become so reactive, they're not making good choices. The internal reference, when you get to internal reference, you don't even notice the outside world, and you become so self-oriented that you become delusionary and having illusions that way, and can become schizophrenic or whatever occurs out there. That you're just you create a great game plan, but it couldn't work on planet Earth because they're so heavenly minded. They're of no earthly good. When we move from external reference out here, these people may be great for making social changes and doing things, but they don't have really a game plan. They haven't thought it through, so they're out here and they're reactionary in that kind of a sense of just they're doing stuff, but in the long term it may not be all that useful or helpful. It may actually be damaging. This is sameness, sorting for sameness, looking for what's working and reinforcing. And someone who is looking for what's the same and doing over here, they may celebrate everything so much so that the person then can never test it and never check it out, and they'll feel great, and they just keep having that party, and it's just reinforced, and it's out there at that level. And of course, the tester can move so much into testing that they can just become the destroyer. They can just destroy it because they over-test it, and they blow it apart, and the testing becomes judgment rather than really helpful. So there's this inner circle of healthy change. So here's another distinction with regard to meta-programs. Sometimes if a person is over too far, before they can have healthy motivation to change or healthy decision to change, we may need to work with them to get it back into a more healthy form. So this would be almost anti-change, or that would be where resistance is, because when people are here, they really need therapy.
And if they're in the coaching office, you're not going to say healthy, we're going to say, does it work for you? Or does that serve you? Or is that ecological?
One of the things we notice about the axis of change, pull a page or two back, you'll notice that there's a pattern with this, that these roles, these parts here, tend to be the tough ones, whereas these here tend to be the nurturing, gentle ones. This is almost the masculine energy, and this is almost the feminine energy, the yin and the yang, as it were. Maybe that's why I tend to play this role more, and Michelle would play this role, because this here is, oh, come over here, let me waken you up to a vision, and let's reflect on this, and you want to make that decision? Let's build it, let's conceive it, and give it birth, and oh, good on you. So gentle, nurturing, supportive. Over here, it is, have you had enough of that stuff? When are you going to make a decision, boy? Are you doing anything? Let's put it to the test and see if it's real.
You say to your sweetheart, I'll believe it when I see it.
I'll believe it when I see it.
I'll believe it when I feel it. It's an illusion.
So it's not really an axis like, reflective and, being extremely reflective to towards creates that up in the top right corner. I mean, it's not like an actual. Let's see.
Loop within loop.
Wow.
Further elucidation.
Like, away from and reactive creates an internal frame. It's not like that kind of.
No.
It's not like that kind of.
No, because each axis,
Okay.
in fact, at first we numbered the axes, and then we decided we don't want to number them because it's not linear, because you can start anywhere. So now we're calling motivation axes, decision axes, creation axes, solidification axes. So the first two is preparation for change. Are you motivated, and are you going to do it? And the next two is actually the creation of change. You're going to create it. What have you created? What are you creating in your actual behavior? And then let's make it solid, and so it'll continue, and there won't be that question of will this last? Because we'll reinforce it and test it and put it into that loop. So there are two loops, and I guess another diagram to diagram that in a way to highlight that. The first two axes creates a certain kind of a loop between toward and away from, reflective and active, or probing and provoking. So with the motivation and the decision one, we just keep going between awakening and challenging, and then probing and deciding, and then awakening, and so it's that kind of a thing just continues until a person is ready to change. So this is all preparation. And once a person is ready to change, then we can go to the other axes. If they're not, then the other axes, you don't need to be creating anything. If you start creating something, and some of the creation will come out of the toward, the awakening, and it'll start to put here, but you can't really create anything unless the person, are you going to do it or not? Have you decided or not? But once they have that, then we have this other one, the creation, and then that loop. So we got really two loops, and the first is preparation for change, and then the second loop is the change and the solidification of it. So
That blue one, that's the one you drew a little bit ago.
So what are you finding about it? Like, it's based on, what's it based on, and what are your, what feedback are you getting from it and its effectiveness? Just curious.
So both of these are two feedback loops, and if you think of the first one, this green loop, how have I drawn the green loop? You can't see how I drew it now. So I don't know how it is, but it's a feedback loop, and it's all about preparation, motivation, and decision. And so where am I with this person? Have they decided? Are they motivated toward or away from, reflective, active? And then the second feedback loop, so that sets up the change has started. We've created it, and it's in this continuous improvement feedback loop. So that once a person has started there, it is designed by presupposition that it will just continue to get better and better and better, and the design and the redesigning is built into the system.
I mean, feedback from some of the coaches that have been implementing this. What's some of the feedback you've gotten in that regard?
Well, we haven't got a lot yet, and partly because it's so new.
Okay. Yeah. It sounds great. I mean, how to package such a dynamic system.
I think one of the things it enables you to know what role you play.
Yeah.
And so the roles. Is this the awakening? Once you know the roles to play, and once you have developed skill, so that's what we do in the meta coaching: develop skill as a challenger or an awakener or prober or provoker, and to strengthen that so that you can step into those states and do those things. And so then we have benchmarked each one of these. What are some behavioral signs and some verbal signs that you're doing this or this or this, so that we're moving to the place that when we do the master coaching, people will be evaluated on this and benchmarked. So if you go for your PCMC, your Professionally Certified Meta Coach certification, you will do a coaching session, and the meta coaches watching will be benchmarking you on these skills to see how skilled you are and to see the signs of it, and you have to have at least a 2.5 to pass.
Now, who are the subjects for this?
Either we'll get some innocent victims, or we'll get somebody in one of the trainings to come in to be coached when we do the PCMC. We're going to do our very first PCMC assessment testing day in September this year in Sydney. And then we'll do it in November in Johannesburg. So we'll do 2 of them this year for the first time. And we've got a number of people who are preparing themselves and getting ready to do that. They have to have 400 paid coaching hours and all the requirements on the website in terms of who's prepared to do that.
How long does it take for a process of change like that on average?
It could take 5 minutes. I mean, a person can walk through those different pieces in just 5 minutes. It could take 3 months.
Yeah, how many sessions would be in 3 months?
Well, most of our coaching sessions is set up is fortnightly, every other week, every second week is more typical than not. Some coaches will do it every single week.
How much time per every 2 weeks? 1 hour?
Some coaches will do it just 1 hour. I think most of the coaches are 2-hour sessions.
2 hours, so that'd be like 4 hours a month times 3 would be 12. It's not bad.
So it depends on what a person is wanting to achieve and where they are, in their present situation. It's just so relative, and we have not been tracking that kind of thing.
It's a lot better than Barbara Streisand. She's been going for 35 years.
Yeah.
In all the examples that you've been doing with the people through this training, I've been trying to figure out, how you're going on, and I feel like you're using this model.
Yeah.
Are you
Definitely.
consciously using it? Okay. Because I definitely see your roles now that you've laid it out like that. It's really very cool. Very cool.
I'm going to get Cheryl Richardson to do a color mapping on this, like she did on the Matrix.
What's the therapy?
What is conative or conating mean?
Conative means to choose, so it's choice. The older psychologists of the 18th century, the 19th century, the 1800s, the psychologists of that century had 3 human functions, not just mind and emotion, not just thought and feeling, but it was thought and feeling and choice. Conation. So cognitive, emotional, and then conative. And we added that in when we did the meta programs. We had all the choice meta programs. And because it's part of it's one of the main functions of our consciousness, how we choose or not choose. And so that's that part of it. So it really is emotional. Is there emotion? Is there decision, choice? Is there cognition? Do you know what you're doing? And then the last one is just reinforcing that so that it solidifies in actual experience.
Is that book going to be in spiral or?
No, it'll be a hard paperback. No, we're doing it ourselves. They're too slow.
No.
Michelle and I will be presenting the Axis of Change at the ICF in Quebec in November. So if you want to meet us during the actual ICF. So we're looking forward to doing that. I've presented this to several ICF meeting groups, and as far as I can tell, there's nothing in the market like it. Most of the change models, people have been so vague about change. How does it actually occur? What do I actually do? And some people are intuitive and they can make it happen, but to explain how change actually happens, there's not been a lot of explanation. And most of the explanations go back to old theories of psychology, of people who are hurt and wounded people, who have deficiency needs, rather than people who just, I want to take my skills to the next level. Help me to change. How do I do that? And so this picks up a lot of those different dynamics.
Could it be used as a therapy model?
It could be used as a therapy model, and that's why we've drawn the outer circle and the inner circle. The outer circle is where there is wound in the way the person processes, and that needs to be healed before a person is really able to be healthily motivated, make a healthy decision. Because when someone's reactive and they're just reacting, they're not ready for coaching. They need that healed to quit being so reactive. Or they need the ego strength to face reality. or they need to quit having so many illusions and just, what is realistic as far as a real vision for your life. So that's why we've drawn this outer one, so that the same model can be now applied to therapy. So someone who wants to do therapy, and then they can figure out when is therapy over and coaching ready. And if you as a coach find somebody here and you don't want to do therapy, now you can refer. And you can refer specifically. You can do the word diagnosis doesn't seem to be the right word, but you can provide a diagnostic identification of what the person really needs. And when they get that, then they're ready. Then they come back for coaching.
That distinction is becoming more and more important, especially in states like Minnesota, where everything is regulated down to everything is regulated. And we're really doing a big fight right now about is coaching something that comes under the auspices of counseling, where it has to be regulated. So the Minnesota chapter of the ICF is doing everything we can to keep the counseling terminology out of our coaching. We don't call them patients, we call them clients. We don't use any of those old words. And another difference there, I was talking with a friend, and I was just saying specifically about a client, Andrew, and I said, Andrew, you haven't done 30% of what we've agreed you're going to do. Just, we'd never say that in counseling. And you wouldn't, because it would blow them out of the water. But in coaching, you challenge them and say, you agreed to do X, Y, Z, and you did part of X.
I noticed that in the coaching dance, you sometimes move into a teaching or a consulting or even a therapeutic role. From your experience, where is that threshold of saying, you know what, with just NLP or neurosemantic techniques, you can address some of these issues versus referring to a therapist? And being able to discern that threshold.
So the distinction between coaching and therapy would be this charge. If you're working with somebody, they're motivated, they have that decision, even at the decision level, sometimes they may not have enough information to make that decision. So you might have to step out of probing and say, let me step out of this role for just a moment. Let me consult with you about some information I have on this subject or that. And so you may move into a consultant role, a mentor role, a teaching role, a training role, so that when you step back into it, now that you have that information, let's probe into your frames and where are you? Same thing with co-creator or in actualizer. They may not have the skill to bring it out. So let's step aside, or let me refer you to someone who can train that skill in you. When you come back and you got that skill, then we can pick up the coaching so that you can start actualizing it. In meta-coaching, we do that dance between the modalities. The diagram we use that seems to be an effective way of thinking about it is if we put coaching in the middle and we start distinguishing it from these other modalities, but these other modalities will have some kind of interface with it. Here we have consulting. Here we have mentoring. Here would be therapy or counseling. And here would be training. One of the things that we really emphasize is that coaching is not these other things. Consulting is when someone has some expertise in some content and they're going to consult. So coaching is not consulting, then what is coaching? Mentoring is usually someone older, may not be older, but someone who has some experience, who knows the ropes about something, and who can, out of his or her personal experience, mentor someone else. But mentoring is not coaching, so then again, what is coaching? We've done that with therapy. Therapy is when someone needs healed, when they're past-oriented, when the ego strength is weak, when there's a wound, when there's hurt going on, the deficiency needs, and they need healing. And coaching is not that, so what is coaching? Training is when someone needs some skills and they need practice of the skills, they need driven through drills so they can learn those. So training is about developing new skills, and coaching is not about developing new skills, it's expressing it. So this leaves us, what is the area of coaching? and what is a unique place. Now, we may have to dance in and out at different times, and if we're clear as to what coaching is mobilizing the resources of a client, mobilizing their resources. They already have it, so they don't need an expert to train them or consult or mentor them. Mobilizing these resources to take their skills and unleash them for their new potentials. So they're ready to have it released. They've got the ego strength to handle that. So that really defines it and creates a narrow place for where we do coaching. And it makes it really a separate modality. And so there's a dance. We can dance in and out. What we have found is that the people who have the hardest time to learn how to coach are the people who come from therapy. We've had more trouble with therapists, and being a psychologist, being a therapist myself, because it's so easy for us to slide on those glasses of therapy and see a problem. But this is not problem-oriented. This is solution-oriented. And so we have slapped so many therapists down. Quit doing therapy. Quit seeing problems. Quit diagnosing. Believe in the client being able to have that potential just to blossom, and they don't need you. They don't need me. But my training. My fees. Actually, most therapists knows that coaches get paid a lot better than therapists. So, but the challenge for consultants and mentors and even trainers is being the expert. In coaching, you're not the expert. The client is the expert. The client is the expert. They get to set the agenda. And so we have to set aside that expert. We're an expert in process, not content. And if there's anything that is just almost pure process, coaching comes really, really close to pure process. When I do training, I'm doing a lot of teaching. I do process, and it's a mixture, but it's not pure process at all. Because I'm going to be offering something, hopefully, that I know about. Same thing with consulting and mentoring. I mean, that's why they get paid what they get paid, because they've got some expertise that they're going to give you. And coaching is so different. That's why sometimes you can coach best if you know nothing about the client's area of work. And Tim Galloway has demonstrated this again and again. We tell some of those stories in meta coaching about that your knowledge can get in the way, can really get in the way when you coach, because you'll be tempted to teach. And so that's where we get our red hot poker out. I always bring my whip. Quit that teaching. The client's area.
What work or whatever.
The work, what they're doing, their area. It prevents us from asking know-nothing questions, because we know.
Get into content, right, with neurosemantics, or we don't have to?
Well, now we're talking coaching, not just neurosemantics as such. Coaching is a facet, and coaching is driven by questions. When we were in London, the first time we were in London, we invited Veronica Lim, an Asian lady who was in banking, who left banking, decided to become an executive coach, jumped into executive coaching. We heard about her. I called her and spoke with her, and I invited Veronica to come to our meta coach training. Veronica came in. She didn't come in for the whole training. She came in for a day or so. She saw what was going on. And it was the day that I was going to model her. So I asked her to come up. I spent 2 hours modeling her and asking her questions, how she got started. She's charging £450 an hour. So, top of the food chain. And she has no history in psychology. She doesn't know anything about psychology. She's NLP Master Prac. That's all she has. All she has. And she works out of her home sometime on the phone, and then she goes to their offices and charges that. So we interviewed her and asked her, and I said, Veronica, I said, show us what you can do. And I said, the group's yours. So she came out and she said, "Okay, I'll work with somebody. What do you want to work on?" So people started raising hands and she started asking questions. And she picked the person I would not have picked. There was a person, and as she even talked to her, every time she said something, she mismatched her. She said, "Come here." So they came up and sat down, and Veronica started the coaching process. 20 minutes later, this lady had some outcomes that she had been working on using NLP for years. And when Michelle came up to do the debriefing, Michelle noticed that she had never made a statement. Veronica never made a statement. She never said a thing, never told her. She asked 42 questions in 20 minutes. She did pure coaching. And so coaching is driven by questions. And so the power to ask questions, and not just primary questions, and not just trivial questions, but profound questions, questions that drive to the heart of things, and that evoke those potentials, and mobilizes and unleashes. And so that modeling,
But you're saying that she didn't know anything about what this person did? Is that what you're...
Well, that's a little different point, but my point is she didn't have to know. She didn't have to say anything. She just asked questions. Tim Galloway tells in his book, in the year 2000, The Inner Game of Work, he tells about being hired by the Houston Philharmonic Orchestra. So he goes into this orchestra, and he says, "I don't know anything about music." So he presents himself, and so he says, "Okay, who's got a problem?" Well, somebody who blew into some big tuba kind of thing says, "Well, I've got this problem." And he says, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, I just can't get this note." He said, "Well, show me what you do." So he blew into it, and everybody in the orchestra went, "Ah!" And Tim wrote in his book, he said, "Sounded good to me." So Tim says, "Well, what were you aware of?" And he says, "Well, I was aware of tight throat and parsed lips and the sound coming out this way." And he says, "Well, what were you trying to do?" He told him what he was trying to do. He says, "Well, what were you wanting to do?" I mean, just question after question after question. "What did you want to do?" "I want to do that." He said, "Well, let's try it again, and this time just be aware of what you're doing with your lips." So he blew in, and it was perfect. And the whole orchestra was going, "Ah." And the guy had been stuck doing this tone that he couldn't get for weeks. And he said, I don't want you to try it. Don't change anything. Just do it again and be aware of what you're doing. So this is where you don't have to know the content. Because if you believe the person has the expertise and the skill, and you have process questions that can facilitate, we're the facilitator. And we facilitate mostly with questions, but we can do process instructions.
So it seems to me like a critical piece of this is to determine how do I say this, whether this person is ready for coaching.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you just here you are trying to be a coach, you're trying to develop fees and make a living and all this kind of thing. Here comes somebody that would just have these ideas, but you realize, gosh, they don't need this shit. So you have to turn them away.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty bold and brave and secure to do that.
So one of the things we're doing in our meta coaching is we're spending days helping people develop some business savvy, how to run a business, how to think as an entrepreneur. Denise was there when we were in South Africa, and I found an entrepreneur while I was there on that particular trip. Anne Renew had set up for us to speak on a national radio program. So Michelle and I went in. We did an hour interview, and this guy, Brian was interviewing us, and he was a disc jockey, and so he's playing this rock and roll music, and then he would interview us, and he plays rock and roll. And so while the rock and roll music, and he was just tapping away. And I said, "What else do you do?" Because he was about my age. And I said, "What else do you do in life?" And he was real hesitant. He said, "Well, I do some other things." I said, "Well, like what?" And it turned out he had a headhunting company for CEOs. He brought Microsoft in South Africa, made millions. It turns out he had 7 other companies. And I said, "Why are you running a radio program and being a disc jockey on Wednesday nights. He says, you wouldn't believe it. He says, I can get on the phone, call any CEO up, saying, I'd like to interview you for the radio program. And he gets in. And he says, well, before I get you on the radio, let's go out for dinner so I can really know you and really present you well on the radio for that hour. So I said, Brian. And it turned out he also did executive coaching for about $500 an hour. And I said, come here. So he came to the training. We presented him to the whole group. I just interviewed him as an entrepreneur. Because we're not going to be able to make money unless we can think about how business works. And one principle of business is adding value. And adding value before you get. And so a great example of that, he impressed all of us. It's just all the things he was doing.
Just beautiful. His wife was beautiful too. They're just. I went home with him the last night I was there. So here's this guy who's got name recognition all over Johannesburg and Victoria, and we're sitting in one part of his house and decide to call and make reservations for dinner. It's, hi, this is Brian. He didn't say Hatton, didn't once use that. It was Brian. Walked into the bar, and Brian. Never once used his power. Just down to earth, right there.
So one of the things we're doing in the Meta Coaching is really spending time on the business. Everybody has to write a business plan. That we use the matrix model business plan. So everybody has to write that business plan, and it helps them to think in terms of those and the states. What are the states of excellence that you need to do to negotiate, to work, to sell, to market. And so we do all of that kind of stuff, which I think is fairly unique in the field of coaching. 80% of the people graduating, I understand, from Coach U, within 1 year will not be coaching. They'll just quit their business. So like so many, a great start, and then just so many get so disappointed because they're not ready to do business. They don't know how to do business. So we really want to equip people with some business skills, and so I'm always looking for business examples and models who can come in and talk about that, and that's why we get the business experts, the people who are actually doing it, and not just talking about it.
Did you figure out how Veronica did her stuff?
Yeah, we modeled out.
Where is it?
Remember that? Where is that? Well, there's a special report coming out on neurosemantics for only $179 for that 10-page report.
20% discount.
Yeah, you can get 20% discount if you sign up today.
But what you're saying is that one thing I was picking up is she chose someone specifically that was mismatching her. So not only was she content free, she didn't even feel like she had to have a specific rapport with that person. She just started asking questions.
Because one of the things about entrepreneurs get turned on by challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So a person who does not have an entrepreneurial spirit, when the challenge comes, it's, why did I have to put up with this? Whereas an entrepreneur, and develop that, and we're going to get to that in a couple days, to develop that, oh boy, I don't have an idea under hell. How in the world am I going to do this? But oh boy, am I going to learn. And it turns you on. It juices you up. It gets you excited. And the bigger the challenge, the more energy comes out. So if we're going to create our own businesses and take on things and not get defeated, that's part of resilience. That's part of just that go-for attitude. And the semantic that we put around challenge. So
I've found, like, when I'm working on business plans with entrepreneurs, a lot of it is just a real high self-efficacy. Mm-hmm. In other words, I don't know everything. I know this kind of thing, and I have a hunch it's going to sell, but I can do it. I'll figure out a way to do it, which is where I think that when the challenge comes, that's what they rise to, because in a sense, they're proving their self-efficacy by figuring out the problem and figuring out the challenge, and that is a huge motivation.
Yeah. There is an article on our website, if you want to read it, The Secrets of Entrepreneurs. And I think I pulled out 7. I did it from Michelle, from Graham, from Brian. It seems like there was a couple other people I mentioned in that article.
Graham?
So Graham Richardson. Graham Richardson went through my master prac 4 years ago in Australia. He came through my master prac. He had been through Landmark, came to NOP, did prac with somebody, came and did my master prac. And after master prac, he decided he was an executive coach, so he quit his business. He was in business. He was a manager in a certain business, so he quit his business and became an executive coach. He was so skilled that within 6 months, Stevenson Partnership hired him. Peter Stevenson wrote the book Executive Coaching, which is kind of a trashy little book. I mean, it doesn't say anything. But he was first in the field and created the largest executive coaching business in Sydney. He's got 36 or 40 coaches, and they're in a high-rise building downtown Sydney, and they'll charge $1,000 an hour or something. And so Graham was hired. Within a year, 50% of all the business brought in by Stevenson Partnership was brought in by Graham. The next year, 70% of all business was brought in by Graham. And in that year, he did one-on-one, face-to-face coaching, brought in more than $1 million, walked home with half of that. So I said to Graham, I said, what did you hear in that master prac that... I said, come here.
He was in the business now. He wasn't coaching anymore. He was sales.
No, he was bringing it in by his coaching. He was bringing it one-on-one, face-on-face, him doing it.
To referrals because of results people got? The
business people would hear him and would be working with him, and the results he created would just, the word of mouth started going, so he never advertised. He never sold. And if you want to hear some of him, Tom has got him on tape in some of the interviews. I've done 2 interviews with him on tape, so Tom has that you can purchase that at the end of this. And Graham says that his coaching excellent state is ruthless compassion. Ruthless compassion. And the first time, one of the times in the training, it even came up in the training, I had him just do some processes with the whole group, and the group hated it. Because from the axis of change, he is the challenger, the provoker, the tester. He really plays those roles well, sometimes too well. But if you can imagine senior executives who everybody is yes man, and nobody tells them the truth, and Graham comes in and their truth is in their face within 2 seconds, they're impressed because he's not out to seek to please anybody except Graham. And so, for me, one of the wonderful things is meeting some of these people around the world and interviewing them and learning from them and stealing some of their strategies. But that's one of the focuses we're doing in the meta coaching, to really model people who are out there doing it, because if we can get that model and replicate it, then it raises the quality of the people we turn out. Because that's what I'm committed to. I want to turn out people who can do stuff and who can sell themselves and have business skills and just, that whole package. So.
Write something about model? Or maybe is it kind of throughout books? I was just wondering.
Well, there's a book, NLP Going Meta. That's on modeling. Then there's cultural modeling. Then there's the modeling handbook. And then there's advanced flexibility. Then there's the structure of excellence. Well, they all have different focuses. Well, it's time for this evening.
Well, when can we buy your CD with all the books on it?
There you go.
Milton has one.
Does it? Well, thank you.